Part of this collective effort to call on Multnomah County to issue a resolution for an immediate, permanent ceasefire and to call for the entry of all needed humanitarian aid into Gaza. This is an emergency, and we have an obligation to act to stop it. I'm proud of Multnomah County's values and commitment around equality. By passing a ceasefire resolution, you can leverage these values for a global good. Each action on ceasefire builds on the next. Just yesterday, Chicago joined about 50 other localities that have passed ceasefire resolutions. The Council on Islamic Organizations of Greater Chicago said, quote, "This sends a resounding message to political leaders across the nation that respect for innocent human life is a guiding moral principle for civilized societies," end quote. Local resolutions confirm what the polls show, that well over 60% of Democratic voters want a ceasefire. We need all levels of leadership to publicly support senators such as Jeff Merkley in calling for ceasefire and aid delivery. Last week, the International Court of Justice declared that there is plausible evidence that Israel is committing genocide in Gaza, and that they must take all measures to cease these acts. But in the days that followed that ruling, Israel has continued bombing civilians, hospitals, and aid workers. And they have continued to restrict entry of humanitarian aid. Our community here is broken in grief. On the local level, there is a connection between billions of US dollars spent on funding Israel's military and the chronic lack of funds to meet vital human needs locally. Please, we need a ceasefire now to fund our local services and the crises in this county. Thank you.
My name is Alexandria Salim. I am a Palestinian American born in diaspora here in Portland, where my family has built our lives and community. I am here representing 4 generations of my family displaced from our home village in Palestine since 1948, my 2 children being the youngest. I am here today to emphasize the deep local repercussions of this global issue that it has had on our Portland and Palestinian communities especially, and to call upon Multnomah County to support the thousands of your constituents urging you to support an immediate and permanent ceasefire and the entry of urgent humanitarian aid into Gaza. Every day that the massive bombardments continue, our families are dying. Gazans are being denied the very basic essentials of life, leading to more unimaginable horrors of suffering from hunger, dehydration, and disease. I hear from my family of the unlivable conditions of displacement currently in Rafah, sleeping in the remains of bombed buildings, all without homes to return to, having lost everything, fleeing from the Jabalia refugee camp in the north that has since been flattened by Israeli airstrikes. As Palestinians, it is painfully clear that every day without a ceasefire, there is unprecedented loss for our communities in Multnomah County and globally. Your Palestinian constituents with relatives in Gaza have lost entire branches of their family. In October, my great-uncle witnessed 3 of his children and all of their children, his grandchildren, killed. Soon after, he was too murdered in an Israeli airstrike. 2 of his sons and their entire families were taken a week later. 19 of my family members have been killed in their home by Israeli airstrikes that we know of. They were civilians, all of which became so-called legitimate targets of the Israeli military. Every day that our representatives are silent, we, your constituents, lose more and more family. My family's story is mirrored by the countless other Palestinians in Multnomah County. Now is the moment where we ask you to speak out and join the other 50 local governments who have called for an immediate ceasefire. Do your part to introduce a ceasefire resolution, Matt. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners. I'm Reverend Ron Warner Jr. I'm a Lutheran pastor and community organizer here in Portland. I'm here today alongside people of faith and courageous love throughout Oregon who ask you to call for an immediate and permanent ceasefire in Gaza. My eyes were opened to the occupation in 2015 upon an interfaith delegation alongside Jews, Muslims, Christians, and a woman who was a part of the Sikh tradition, spending time with the people of Palestine and Israel. I remember meeting a boy who every day would pack his stuffed animals and bring them with him in his backpack to school because he was afraid his home would not be there when he got home. That's an image that has been seared in my mind as I tuck my own 10-year-old daughter in at night and line up her stuffies just so, in order for her to take a deep breath and fall asleep. That ritual, that bedtime ritual, has taken on a new meaning since October, as countless children and parents have lost life in Gaza. My colleague, Palestinian Lutheran pastor Munther Isaac, says this: "We will rise, we will stand up again from the midst of destruction, as we have always done as Palestinians. But for those who are complicit, I feel sorry for you. Will you ever recover from this?" I wonder the same. How will we recover if we remain silent? If we continue to let our tax dollars fund this disproportionate response? How will we solve the biggest challenges closer to home, violence in our own streets, if we have no words to speak to the 27,000 people, many of whom are children, who have lost their lives in Gaza? Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, who marched with King in Selma, said, "Words build worlds." We're under no illusion that words like ceasefire mean abracadabra or hocus pocus and all of the problems go away when we say them. But I am convinced, as Rabbi Heschel was, that words do build worlds. It's a call forward. Words can stop bombs and disproportionate violence, giving a chance for us to find a pathway forward.
Thank you.
Please join the countless people of faith and the other 50 cities whose local officials have called for a ceasefire.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Nayab Seker. I'm a Palestinian American born and raised in Gaza City. 2 months ago, I lost 39 people of my immediate family. My cousin Laila and her sister Rahab, along with their husband, children, and grandchildren, they were evacuated from their home, sheltered in the Baptist hospital that was shot by a big rocket. Maybe it was paid by our tax money. 500 people was killed in the same incident. 2 days ago, I lost another 2 people of my family. What's happening in Gaza is insane. It's not a conflict, it's a genocide. It's ethnic cleansing. It must be stopped. I'm looking for you guys. I appreciate that you put the ceasefire now immediately. It's really terrible. Every day I hear from my family that they have no food, they have no water. They boil their salty water and strain it twice to give it to their children. An immediate humanitarian aid has to be get in, and people, 2.3 million people suffering every day. Politicians keep saying that Israel has the right to defend itself. Killing 27,000 people is not defending itself. Innocent civilian people. Using white phosphorus bombs is not to defend itself. It has to be stopped, and it has ceasefire now has to be implemented. Thank you.
Good morning, I'm Lori King. My father and some in his family escaped from Nazi Germany. He then served in the United States Army fighting fascism. My lifelong labor, environmental, and anti-war activism was inspired by my parents and their Jewish values of life and justice. I'm one of thousands of proud American Jews calling for a ceasefire. Jobs with Justice asks you to endorse the resolution before you. Huge unions like the United Auto Workers and the largest teachers unions, postal workers, and SEIU, representing the majority of American workers, have called for a ceasefire. Very locally, AFSCME 88 called for a ceasefire. Calling for a ceasefire is mainstream. This degree of union advocacy against a war that the United States is fully supporting is totally untypical, thus showing the horror that workers feel about how the people of Gaza are being treated. As an environmentalist in the coalition working on the CEI hub, I thank you for the report you commissioned on deadly toxic vapors that we can expect after the big one. Please think about how unprecedented thousands of Israeli and US bombs dropped on Gaza bring not only death, but a toxic legacy that will be felt for generations, from explosive chemicals, dust, and debris from destroyed buildings. Please think about the white phosphorus that Israel is using that is infecting the drinking water. Imagine how sewage is draining into streets because treatment plants cannot be operated. Gaza's environment is being killed before our eyes. Wouldn't Israeli security be better served if the United States and Israel were to stop the onslaught, let Gaza rebuild, and even help Gaza clean its environment? I ask you to join the mainstream of U.S. opinion, to stand for life, and to help let Gaza survive. Please vote for the ceasefire resolution. Permanent ceasefire now. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair Vagan-Peterson and Commissioners. My name is Nick Caleb. I'm the Climate and Energy Attorney at Breach Collective, a local 501c3 nonprofit. I come before you today as a big supporter of the work of the county, particularly your ongoing commitments to climate justice and protecting the residents from dangers of fossil fuel infrastructure. I thank you for your efforts and humbly ask you to continue work with one another this year toward policy to protect Multnomah County residents. I also ask you to take action on the issue that, for many in this room, myself included, is the most pressing concern in the world right now: the continuing Israeli assault on Gaza. As you heard from Maxine, the International Court of Justice recently issued an order finding that it's plausible that acts of genocide are happening in Gaza presently. The court, presided over by an American, Joni Donahue, a former advisor to Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, issued the order after hearing evidence, much of which you've heard today. In contrast to spin in the American media, many international outlets correctly reported the significance of this order. Israel must take all efforts within its power to protect Palestinians in Gaza from acts intended to kill, cause serious bodily and mental harm, prevent births, and deliberately inflict conditions of life calculated to bring about the physical destruction in whole or part of Gazans. In immediate and flagrant contravention of this order, Israel, with the full support of the United States military, has continued to kill innocent people, destroy infrastructure, and cause mass starvation. I appeal to your morality and your pragmatism in asking Multnomah County to join other 50 local governments across this country in calling for a ceasefire. We must stop these atrocities. It cannot continue without American support. And the only way that we can end our country's involvement is by continuing to collectively speak out and organize against these atrocities. Calling for a ceasefire is literally the least that we can do. And it is meaningful, and it does add to the collective effort to end these horrors. Thank you.
My name is Asma Khanna. I am a professor of nursing and a pediatric nurse practitioner. I practice in Portland. I am here in my capacity as a nurse. In Gaza, the health system has collapsed as a result of the past 4 months of this assault. Where there is no health system, there cannot be life. I actively participated at the Children's Hospital in Gaza and dedicated the last 15 years to coordinating specialized medical care for children. In fact, I was supposed to be there on November 4th. I am Palestinian, and my personal connection to the ongoing crisis stemmed from my family's displacement during 1948, leading to their lives in refugee camps. I am here to advocate for you to pass a resolution supporting an immediate ceasefire and unlimited humanitarian aid to Gaza. As a healthcare provider, it is difficult to fathom that only 9 out of 36 hospitals in Gaza are operating, and just barely. Tragically, many of my fellow colleagues, nurses and doctors, have lost their lives in airstrikes and targeted bombings of hospitals and ambulances. Ahmed Khaled, a nurse, lost his life while caring for his patient. Asma al-Asr and Dr. Ahmed is a physician, were killed in airstrikes to their hospitals. All 3 were innocent healthcare providers who are working to help others. The collapse of the healthcare infrastructure, coupled with the pervasive violence from the Israeli military, mass displacement, and the threat of widespread starvation and disease are inhumane and unacceptable. How can people live when there is no water, no food, no shelter, no medicine, and no sanitation? A ceasefire is not just a plea for humanity, it's an urgent necessity to hold this ongoing genocide. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have family in Israel. I visited there for a wedding a month before October 7th. My cousin's son is in Israeli intelligence. He was one of the first responders ahead of the IDF on October 7th. I know that he saw heads of slain people that were hung in trees. There was incredible devastation. There was rape and sexual abuse, all of which have been documented. I am asking you to vote against the ceasefire resolution in order to give our government time to try to work with the Israelis, the Qataris, and so on, so that we can see a long ceasefire with good restrictions on activities, and more importantly, the release of the hostages. I don't even want to think about the conditions that they've been existing under. Again, I feel for the people. I ask you please to vote against this resolution. Thank you.
My name is Sophie Smith. I was born and raised here in Multnomah County. I went to Lincoln High School. I live here now as a professor of women's health and global leadership, and I'm here today because my grandparents survived Nazi concentration camps to have my mother who had me. This history lives inside me, and I bear responsibility now to urge you to call for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. 14 of my family members were exterminated, from great-grandmothers to small children. The names of our dead are inscribed on the Oregon Holocaust Memorial here in the county, along with my mother's as survivor. It is our cemetery because there's no final resting place for our people who perished in the Shoah. But now, for 118 days, I wake up each morning to new images of dead children, of dead parents, of dead elders, buried in the rubble, held in mass graves, or left shrouded on the streets of Gaza, all murdered with the tools of state terror, and this time with US-supplied bombs and bullets. I never thought I would grow accustomed to seeing such images outside of the Nazi archive, and I am horrified that my family's victimization at the hands of a murderous state is being used to justify the eradication of entire family lines in Gaza by a belligerent regime today. This is a perversion of politics to which I must answer clearly as a descendant of survivors to say, never again means never again for anyone. When it comes to what will keep us all safe from catastrophe, including our Jewish and Palestinian communities and everyone here today, I am reminded of the wise inscription on the Holocaust Memorial, which tells us that, quote, our precious life rests on the moral strength to believe in our common humanity and to act upon that belief. So I ask today, will we act now? Will we do our part with confidence to call for a ceasefire to protect the children of Gaza? Or will we be among those who stood by and did nothing while unspeakable atrocities are unleashed on our human community? History will judge us all for what we do here today, commissioners. Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Jenna, and I'm a Palestinian American, and I have lived here in Oregon my whole life, specifically Portland, Oregon. I am a daughter of a Palestinian refugee. In 1967, my father was ethnically cleansed from his village Silat al-Dahar in what's now called the West Bank. Through educational opportunities, my dad came here to Oregon and made his life. Now I'm married to a Palestinian man from Gaza, and we are making our own little life here in Oregon. I am here today in support of the ceasefire resolution calling for an immediate and permanent ceasefire and humanitarian aid for Gaza. For 117 days, I have lived with fear and worry as my family in Gaza struggled daily to meet their needs. I saw my friends and family here, worried and unspeakable darkness and fear in their eyes as we all saw the daily injustices, indignities, and losses our friends, families, and acquaintances face. As I'm speaking now, upwards of 26,000 Palestinians have been killed in Gaza by Israel and over 65,000 injured. Homes, hospitals, schools, cultural and community centers destroyed. Over 1.9 Palestinians are internally displaced with their homes and livelihoods destroyed by Israel. Palestinians and our supporters have been engaging with our community for years through events and campaigns to have our city, county, and state end our complicity in violating the human rights of Palestinians. Now, the momentum of this movement has coalesced to demand that Multnomah County live up to its values of social justice, health for all, safety for all, economic and environmental well-being for all communities. During these 117 days, Portlanders of all ages and backgrounds have come out in these streets, rain, shine, ice, to demand a ceasefire now. Businesses have shut it down for Palestine. Portlanders have consistently and clearly demanded one thing: ceasefire now. With these values, there is no doubt that at the bare minimum, Multnomah County must support a ceasefire now.
Thank you for holding this session. My name is Curtis Bell. I'm a past president of Unitarian Universalists for Justice in the Middle East, UUJME, and a member of First Unitarian Church here in Portland. UUJME is a national organization of Unitarian Universalists working for the human rights of all people in Palestine and Israel, both Palestinians and Jews. The basic principles of Unitarian Universalism include respect for the worth and dignity of every human being and a world at peace. Unitarian Universalists have acted on these principles. Thus, our organization has called for a ceasefire in Gaza. Thus, the national leadership of Unitarian Universalist congregations in Boston has called for a ceasefire. Thus, the national organization of Black Unitarian Universalists, Black Lives of Unitarian Universalism, has called for a ceasefire and an end to military aid to Israel. We ask you to do the same. The people of Portland are now paying $10 million each year in taxes as their part of the $3.8 billion in military aid that the U.S. gives to Israel each year. That number will be multiplied by 4 or 5 if the $16 billion promised to Israel is awarded. I know you can envision a much better use of $40 or $50 million here in Portland, dollars here at home, than in the killing of innocent Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank. The International Court of Justice has declared that Israel may be committing genocide, that they must cease all acts that lead to genocide, and that they must provide the humanitarian aid that is so desperately needed. There is no way those goals can be met without stopping the war with a ceasefire. So I urge you now to support the proposed resolution and call for a ceasefire. Thank you.
My name is Ned Roche. I'm Jewish and know the most Jewish thing I can do is to urge you to champion this resolution. 4 years ago, I taught in Gaza. I shared Gazan voices that cry out to be heard. Omar said that after heavy Israeli bombings, his 4-year-old asked, "Would it be possible to go back in your belly, Mommy?" Ahmed expressed, "When I think about my children, I sometimes wish we hadn't had them, not because we don't love them, but because we love them so much." Ralia told me that as bombs were falling, she asked her children what they would do if a bomb hit and they were the sole family survivor. She said she needed to know her kids had a plan. 1% of Gaza's kids have been killed in the past 4 months. Young Nadia told me, "I sleep with a towel over my eyes so when bombs fall, I won't see them." A Gaza psychologist explained, "Who knows whether the outside devastation from the Israeli bombs will ever be cleaned up, but the devastation in these children's hearts runs frighteningly deep." Standing on the ruins of his home, a man gave me the only thing that survived the Israeli bombing, his doctoral dissertation, a comparative study of Ezra Pound and T.S. Eliot. Perhaps what he was saying is that the one thing Israelis cannot destroy are ideas, not just about Pound and Eliot, but the Palestinian people after 75 years deserve justice. History will not judge most leaders kindly, but it will revere those who, under pressure not to do so, found the courage to say ceasefire now.
Thank you.
I've been asking for a humanitarian ceasefire for many months now. There's been no response. from the commissioners or the chair. I've been monitoring all the resolutions being passed in other states for a ceasefire. There's been no response from the chair or the commissioners. Why is that? We need a humanitarian ceasefire now. The people in Palestine are not going to starve to death. We need a humanitarian ceasefire now. We need all hostages released now. We need an end to this war now. Why was there never a resolution passed for a ceasefire or a humanitarian ceasefire? Why? Again, you've hesitated. You haven't taken any action. You're the Multnomah County Health Department. Why would you not ask for a ceasefire through a resolution? It needs to be done. The people that have come into this room today, I have a tremendous amount of respect for. And it's also the power of the people through the world that want a humanitarian ceasefire. It needs to happen now. You need to contact your President of the United States and ask for a humanitarian ceasefire and quit funding the military for this operation in Gaza. Thank you.